my brain doesn't turn out too well. All right.
All right. I think we're going to go ahead and begin if you don't mind. So we're here to look at several areas in the board meeting procedures. We're here to look at board staff role in locations and times of the meetings, clarification of the appeals, perhaps adding a new section regarding disputes, the board procedures, and the ad hoc committee structure. So those are the topics that we're going to be doing. You have before you several things. So we've got original language that we've given you. You have thoughts from Andrea that she sent. You have a document that's kind of blue and red, which are thoughts from myself. So those are, and then also in that blue and red document, you also have in red the thoughts that were previously proposed. Okay, but if you want to see that in its totality, it's attached to the resolution. Okay, so that you've got plenty of things that you can look back and forth with if you want to. So I'm going to go ahead and start off, if you don't mind, and we can look at what I proposed, and we can talk from there, and we can just chime in, and we can look at all three pieces of language. I think there's just an agreement on the board staff handling the meeting logistics. They have to secure the streaming support, and so it's important that those two pieces be locked together with the location. And so to avoid confusion with communication between the two offices, I've simply just said that board staff shall handle meeting logistics, including securing meeting locations and streaming support for all meetings established by the annual meeting calendar. So that is just taken care of, and I think that was one of the requests. And then, actually, it wasn't requested at the regular meeting. I don't believe in the original document, but I was suggesting we put it there. Okay. Oh, yes, it was. It is suggested in a little different way. I don't really even need him to work in consultation with us. Okay. So let's just let the board staff do it. All right. So that's not even in consultation. And
Can
then,
I clarify?
You may.
The chair will set the dates, is that correct?
No, the board sets the dates for the regular meetings, always. So for the regular meetings. Now, the special meeting we can talk about.
Is the annual meeting calendar already set through 2015?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, no, through 2014.
Through 2014.
And we will bring it up again probably in October and November and start to set the dates for the next calendar year.
And is that almost always the second Wednesday of the month? Mm-hmm. That's what it's supposed to be, and it changes if there's some.
That was the first Wednesday of the month.
It's the first Wednesday of the month. First Wednesday of the month. Okay. Sometimes it's been the second because a holiday fell there or something happened, or I stepped in one case.
All right.
So,
all right.
But so anyhow, my office and Cece's office will just let the board staff handle all that, all the logistics pieces of scheduling, getting those meetings where they need to be. Under special meetings, what we have right now, and you can see both pieces of language because you've got both. I'm suggesting that special meetings be held at a date and time convenient to the members, including the chair, and at a location determined by the board staff. And I put the very same sentence in that I put up above. Board staff shall handle meeting logistics, including securing meeting locations and streaming support for the special meeting. So I took out in consultation with us. Okay. Then there was a request in the original language to have 48 hours. Putting hours in there would include weekends and things like that. So we felt it was better to say 2 business days. So members must provide their calendar availability to board staff and the chair's designee within 2 business days after a request for a special meeting has been made. Following this 2-day period, the chair will proceed to select the date for the special meeting, provided that a quorum that includes the chair is obtained. So we have to have a quorum to have a meeting in the first place. So what are your thoughts?
Okay, Okay, so the language that was presented at the July meeting was the board staff
Would select the date.
select a date, and here the chair will proceed to select a date following. I'm trying to think how to satisfy all sides. What if, okay, following this 2-day period, what if we put in immediately following?
Actually, no, I think that's, so what was your suggestion first? But I
My
was gonna say-
suggestion was since your language has the chair selecting the date, there'd be a requirement that the chair selects it immediately.
Okay.
Just because the concern, as I understand it, was that when the board wanted to meet, might be more urgent than when the chair wanted to meet.
Okay. So the chair will proceed to select the date for the special meeting. I'll tell you what, you know what, I'm actually, since there's language in there that I'm included in the quorum, so in other words,
Okay,
a special
okay.
meeting can't be held without me, I am certainly fine with the staff board selecting
Okay.
the date. So why don't we just change that? A 2-day period, and we cross out the chair and put in the board staff.
Okay.
See what I did? Yeah.
Yep.
Is that what you
Yep,
did?
yep, I think that's good.
So leave board staff in there. So I think I'm just fine with that because they're going to, it has to be a date mutually agreeable to me as
Got it.
well.
Yep.
So I think we're fine. All right. So the next item,
Clarification,
yes.
so the only change is making it board staff? And strike chair?
And
Yeah.
will rather than may.
Right. Right. So we'll say, it says, following this 2-day
you already have
period,
will.
board staff will proceed to select a date for the special meeting, provided that the quorum that includes the chair is obtained. Yeah, that's right, James.
So I would secure her date first,
Since my calendar's pretty busy.
okay?
I hear you. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I'm trying to be logical here.
Superintendent.
I agree with that.
Yeah, then we don't have to send out dates to you and then undo them, which would not be good. So, all right, so now the next, I'm wanting to address a concern in a little different way than might have been proposed. So what I've heard the concerns be is putting an agenda item on the actual agenda, okay? And I honestly don't think that that should happen on the day. That no one gets a chance to see, even boards of the members of the board don't get to see what's coming up for action. They don't get any prior information regarding it. And certainly the chair doesn't have any knowledge of it. So I'm suggesting that we solve that problem in a little different way. That we do it the very same way we do for a special meeting. So if somebody wants a special meeting, you need other people have to say, yes, I want a special meeting. And then just do that on email. So if there's an emergency item, then somebody can just say, hey, I want to put this on, and then it takes the 3 board members and the chair to say, yes, we want that on. Then that ensures, number one, we're not going to have public discourse over it at the meeting, and that we all get a copy of what it is that we're going to review. And it has to happen prior to the day of the meeting. I don't care if it's the day before. Okay, as long as it gets to us and we send out the information right away to everybody. To me, that just means there's not going to be any discourse over adding an agenda item that takes action that nobody knows about.
My concern is what if it arises out of a discussion item?
Well, that can't happen because we actually do the agenda work at the start of the meeting.
What if the discussion persuades us that action is needed?
Procedures wouldn't allow that.
Yeah, they don't allow for it now.
No?
No. They don't allow
And
for
the thing
it.
is, because we're a public
Right.
meeting, it has to be posted so many hours in advance. to
And if
be
we
on the
post it as a
agenda.
discussion item, we
It
can't
can be
really.
posted as a discussion item, but it can't, on that day, but it can't be posted as an action item on that day, if I'm clear on my understanding.
Correct, correct.
Awesome.
Wow.
So are we changing 5-day to 7-day to 5-day?
No,
Oh.
no, not at all.
Okay.
No, this 5-day down here, let me explain what I have on here. So on number 2, on the page we're looking at, it says the following exception to the 7 business day rule. So right now, if you want to put an action item on, Andrea, you have to notify us with 7-day period prior to the next meeting and say, I want this to be an action item. And anybody that does that, it goes on. Okay, you don't need anything. It just goes on as an action item. If the chair and 3 members of the board determine that an emergency or special circumstance exists, the matter may be added to the agenda for final action. And I'm suggested that we put prior to the day of the meeting. You know, it doesn't have to adhere to the 7-day. Just as long as it happens before the day of the meeting. So the next section, Andrea, that I wrote down here, that's how we get information out to you.
Okay.
So we have to get it out to you 5 days in advance all the time. But there would be an exception that says the following exception to the 5-day rule applies. If the chair and 3 of the board members determine that an emergency or special circumstance exists, and such action item is added to the agenda, related material is provided to the chair for dissemination as soon as possible prior to the day of the meeting,
Okay.
so that everybody knows
But
what
on
it's going to be.
page 2 of our current
Correct.
procedures, my reading of agenda preparation item number 3
Yes.
is that an action item could be added same day
Not
if
no.
the chair and 3 of the board members determine that an emergency or special circumstance exists.
Only. Oh, you have.
Is that not?
It is here.
Yeah, that's,
We have 2 different versions here of this.
This is my current version.
I
and this
know.
is my-
There's 2 different versions here.
so what Andrea was reading.
She's
from-
got 5 pieces. This one has 4.
So your July 4 board meeting rules have a different name.
I don't know what the one is that you worked off of.
Mine are
I'm
June
just
has
letting you
5
know it
days.
only has 4 items and there's 5 here.
That renumbering happened from my working from board staff's markup.
This? I don't think so.
What's in your new superintendent, I'm sorry?
I am?
No, what is
I
in your?
think this one is your version of this.
Well, it's number 4 is what I'm talking about.
Here is number 3.
Yes, that's still there. We wouldn't change that. So you're saying everything's here, that the numbering was off when you changed it?
Yes.
Working from their document?
But you add prior to the day of the meeting, so under current procedures, you could do it at the meeting itself.
Correct. And I'm
And-
saying that's where the public discourse comes in, and if we all had a copy of whatever it needs to be, there wouldn't be any discourse about it, because it would need to be decided already, which it should be. We shouldn't have agenda items coming before the board that they've not seen a copy of they've never seen the documents, especially the chair. So I'm just saying, hey, let's just eliminate the public discourse altogether. Have it done like we do special meetings. You can think about it. You can think about it. You don't have to make any decisions.
So my question is, if the chair objects, there's then no way to discuss it or appeal it.
No, there wouldn't be any objection because it wouldn't come before us at all, an action item on the day of the meeting.
But what if you object the day before?
There wouldn't be any we're not even together. So if you want to put on, let's say that the last item that came was a resolution that somebody wanted to put on. Let's just pretend they would send it to all the board members ahead of time, electronically. It would take 3 people and myself to say, yes, let's put this on the agenda.
That's what I'm saying, there's no way to appeal it if you say, no, I don't want that added to the agenda.
No, but then it can go on to the next agenda with no problem.
Well, I think that fails to address the presenting problem that led to the resolution in the first place.
Well, that's assuming that we haven't had any items come in this kind of fashion unless they were an actual, I mean, that just leads to somebody saying no. And I don't,
But there's no way, so I'm trying to, I mean, the board is gonna do what the board's gonna do, and I'm trying to anticipate what the board's gonna do, and there seems to be a desire to be able to, immediately appeal adverse, or what are viewed as adverse rulings by the chair. So if the chair denies that, this should be added at the last minute for final action, there's no way to appeal that.
well, so here's the perception of what these procedures are. So if that was the case, Andrea, then there's no need to, I mean, there's a reason that we put 3 people and the chair to approve it.
I agree, and
Okay.
I like that reason.
So that's just how it is. Like, nobody can have, I mean, it's the same for the special meeting. 3 people can call a special meeting, or the chair can call a special
Right.
meeting. And no one can say yay or nay to it if that happens, okay? So it's the same. No one can say yes or no. If you got the people to do it, then it happens. So I think this is simply when you do it on the day of the meeting,
Yeah.
and you appeal, then we haven't followed the procedures. The chair's voice has no meaning. I mean,
But what
I
it
mean, the
means,
chair's voice
what
has
it
no
means then is that anything that's added after the 7-day period requires your approval and can't be appealed if you disapprove.
correct. Correct, that's correct. That's correct. That is what I'm suggesting, because nobody should be surprised for an action item. We should all have a copy of what it is we're going to take action on. We should all be apprised prior to the meeting, even the day before the meeting. We should all know what it is that's coming before us. I shouldn't have to stop a meeting and say, hey, I've never seen this before. I have to have a recess to go look at it. I mean, actually, that's really common courtesy. Everybody should know what it is that's coming before us.
So the thing that concerns me is the action item that might arise out of a discussion.
It would go on the next meeting. If there's ever a need for action as a result of discussion, it would go on in the next meeting, or we would call a special meeting. That's how it's set up right now, as Troy indicated earlier.
I'm gonna be honest with you, the issues that we have developing, in my view as a board member, is the items that are coming up that are added at the last minute that allow no one preparation, including the chair. Thus, this statement here, if we stuck to our policy of it must be in 7 days in advance, it would lessen the need for surprises. And if you had to add something on later, it was going to have to become a special meeting because it's at a time frame that I would like to hopefully get away from us having last second time frame issues. And having this in there allows us to, at the last second, add something that I think that causes all the issues that we have, because then it becomes, what procedure do we pick? If we know in advance it has to be in there and we eliminate that totally, we've eliminated all that possibility, and then it would have to go back to refer back to the special meeting referral. So if it
Okay,
came up
I
with
gotcha.
a decision, then we already have established special meetings. And that, to me, would eliminate, I think, that procedural issue, but it also would get everybody heard.
So let me just take that thought concept a little bit further. So I've used it on occasion where I called for something to be put on. It had to do with probably some regulation or something that had to be approved that we didn't catch in our first go around. So what you're saying is, then if I didn't catch it, then I got to call a special meeting to do it.
Correct.
Okay?
Because that
Yes,
way,
I'm fine
then it
with
would
that
be,
too.
then it would be, allow everybody enough time to reflect.
I'm troubled by the fact that we're talking about agenda preparation and dissemination, because resolution doesn't call for us to address that. And I realize that Superintendent Ritz is attempting to do this in a way that preempts problems at the board meetings, and I appreciate that. But I think that we are out of line with addressing anything in the agenda preparation and dissemination because it's not in the resolution, and the ad hoc committee is
Well, Bob,
tasked with just
Bob,
these.
it asks us to look at these areas.
Okay.
And this group gets to consider that. But in solving the problems, if it requires perhaps another area where language could be inserted to solve the issue, I think that's permissible of the ad hoc committee to work on.
I'm just noting that.
Sure, I know. So I hear you, Troy, saying, hey, let's just get rid of the whole thing about putting emergency items on.
For my feeling is, you know, as a preparing person that has to prepare for our board meetings, that makes only logical sense for us. And it allows us to stay within that structure. However, there is emergencies that do come up that at the meeting can say, because of this issue, we are going to have to organize a special meeting to discuss it, and then you can get your quorum at that meeting so that prior to setting a special meeting. I think it helps, but that's me.
So you would actually, in the following, you would not have an exception.
Nope.
So you would take out the following exception to the 7 business day rule applies, and you would take all of that out, and then that's it. And then if you wanted something else, you'd call the special meeting,
I
of which we
don't
have
know
language.
what the others think, but I think that in terms of logistics, it makes logical sense to me, and it is Robin's rule. That's how it's usually done. You do not add things that aren't on a public agenda.
I don't know.
That's
You want to
you
think about
guys.
it a little
You
bit?
guys
Well,
think about
I hate thinking aloud. It's always dangerous, but as I came here today, one of my purposes was, wouldn't it be great if we could produce a document that the board would approve 11-0? And maybe that's a unrealistic goal, but I feel that the board majority is fairly insistent that there be a way to take urgent action on items that arise at the last minute.
And I guess I would say that they're not arising at the last minute necessarily. They're simply surprise agenda items, and it puts everybody off kilter.
So can we still add an agenda, we can still add an agenda item in the morning, but it just can't be an action item? Is that
Oh,
correct?
yes, we can add report items, discussion items. Oh, yeah, they can be added
And that could be,
anytime.
and if the chair didn't
Anytime.
agree, that could be.
Oh, yeah,
But
anytime.
they could add that as a discussion item.
Oh,
I really think they could add it
yes,
as a
they
discussion
could,
item.
Sure, you always can.
And then, if they determined that it was urgent, then you could set your special meeting. You have your language already there.
Could theoretically the special meeting occur right after the regular meeting?
No, because it has to have notice.
How much notice does that have? 40 hours,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah, we have to put out
Okay.
public
Okay.
notice.
Well, as you know, as a matter of principle, any action item, there ought to be 48-hour notice. So Troy, what would you do then?
His suggestion is taking out all the exception, that you just get it in within 7 days. If you don't get it in, then you are stuck with making a special meeting and getting people to agree with you on a special meeting.
So in the hypothetical that a board requests an agenda item, shows up in the morning and it's not on the agenda.
Say that again?
You request an agenda item and it doesn't show up on the agenda.
Oh, it always, well, that will always not, that won't happen anymore. Because
Okay.
remember, we send everything out to you 5 days in advance.
Okay.
So the agenda is set. And if that would happen as a mistake or whatever amongst the two State Board of Ed staff and our staff, then we would get it fixed, because clearly we would know that somebody requested it.
So when we request an item after a board meeting, how soon would you have access to that item as your staff is preparing the?
We want to make sure that we get 5 days in advance so that we can send it out to you. We don't necessarily have all of the documentation. We want it to be going out. It has to go out with all of the agenda 5 days in advance.
And number 2, doesn't it say
You have 7 days
Seven.
to get it to us
7 days?
prior,
So 5 business, it says 7 business days.
correct?
So that would be, we'd have to submit to Laura, the way it is right now,
Mhm.
and a copy to, say, Bob,
Right,
7 days in advance.
correct. And that's how we get almost all items.
That's really 10 days, or 9 days, right?
Yes, and that's okay.
It
I
gives
wanna
that
make sure.
window between when you've asked for it and when we have to have like a material prepared.
So that would give 2 days. If somebody did it within that 7-day window, that's 2 business days then before we have to send it all out to you.
Is that sufficient? I want to ask that question. Is that sufficient for information to be done? And if concerns arise, whether communication can be done with the person that's requesting it, because it may be one that you would withdraw. If you have, clarification, it could be withdrawn if you have that time frame, but they have to be contacted back.
I think typically we're able to do that.
Okay.
We're able to get communication going and regarding what is this action item about, okay, and what does it need. If it's sometimes a resolution or something has to be created for it, I think it's up to us to get it done, so that you get it within your 5-day time period.
I was just saying to Laura, since her and Bob meet weekly is kind of the rule of thumb we're going to try to be. We've had items like that, Troy, where a board member will say, clarify this for me, they decide, I bet we can clarify this, they give the person a call.
Right.
And then it doesn't go on the agenda. So yes, I think that happens naturally, but are you asking for a time frame for that to happen?
No, but what I'm saying is, I think that has to be part of this procedure also, that there is, some of the conflicts that we've had is, there hasn't been a conversation like that, and there has been a not action item that has been maybe not approved or wants to be held off the agenda. And I think if they had that communication and had that openness, I don't think you would see it at the board meeting. And I think that's what my goal is too, is clear up these things that we spend 30 minutes at a time, and we really have time is of the essence to all of us. And I think if we can do more on the back end of that, instead of right there at the moment, I think it would help all of us perspective.
Well, your suggestion's a fair one, because even me as the chair, I can't put something on either.
So we 3 agree that it's simply poor policy for any final action item to appear on the day of the meeting, regardless of source, regardless of how many people support it.
That's my position.
It's mine too. I think that when you rush things, you can make bad decisions. And I think that I don't want to force anyone into making a bad decision.
So we, unfortunately, that, our point of view lost 7-3 at the last meeting. But I think that if we can explain it the way Troy explained it.
Well, the vote that we took was for this committee to be formed and take a look at this. So that's all that happened at the last meeting. It wasn't a vote on changing procedures. It was a vote on get this committee together to look at.
And it doesn't change the procedure, in my eyes, of how to add an item to, as a board member, how to add an item. It just eliminates any possibility of adding something after that time frame.
Okay, I think we 3 agree on that.
So the suggestion is to actually take out the exception to add an emergency item. And that there are procedures already in place to deal with any of that. So you could either put it on discussion, so that we would eliminate the sentence, the following exception to the 7 business day rule applies. Just eliminate putting on an emergency piece. And that would apply to me too. So if we didn't do our due diligence and get something on that needed to be approved, then it's up to me to call a special meeting or to, you know, go put it on as a discussion item and vote on it later. So that'd be fair to everybody.
And then the second period at the bottom.
Yes, and I crossed off the blue. So now another area that was spoken to.
Can I ask a question? And
Sure.
Being only on the board a year, how many, are the board members following the timeline correctly on the most part, the ones that add action items?
Mhm.
They're following the timeline, so this would not be a major change to them?
No, they are.
I wouldn't think so.
Okay. Bob, would you agree?
I think everybody's,
And they would be satisfied with that, knowing that that's how the rules are, they're gonna play that rule.
tell me exactly which one where on the page we
The
struck
7
that?
days.
The 7
7
days.
days ahead.
On number 2?
Yeah.
In number 2.
Mhm. So really, on the board procedures, we are eliminating number 3. The following exception to the 7-day rule.
I think they'll struggle with that, honestly. I mean, I'm not sure of that, but I think they will.
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you, though, that's been the struggle is
That's
the
where
last
the
minute
discourse
stuff.
is, right.
The last minute stuff is causing most of the, and we gotta clean that up if we're gonna be effective.
You asked me, I told you
Yeah,
what
no,
I thought.
I,
I mean,
I wanted to know.
I'm not
Sure.
agreeing or disagreeing with anything, I'm just telling you what I thought.
Yep. But we are following that. I think the
For the,
And that forces all of us to be diligent on that.
I think it's been rare that the day before or the day after, there's been action items that the board or superintendent attempt to add. I don't think that's something that happens very often.
So what we're saying, if something is that urgent that it needs to be added and it falls within the 7-day period, we're gonna have to call a special meeting.
We
Is that
would,
correct?
we would if it really did need to take some kind of action. But I think your point was, and yours, Troy, too, that it could be added as a discussion item, and we could get the discussion over with. We could, you know, even if we had a special meeting, would probably be a quick one, because we would already have discussed it.
Can I ask a question? Because if, like, let's say, 3 days before a board meeting, something happens, and you or a board member says, wow, we're gonna need a special meeting for that. Can that be called prior to the board meeting?
As long as there's 48 hours notice,
And-
a meeting can occur.
Yeah.
Theoretically, it could occur right after the board meeting, because you have
Right.
48
If
hours
you gave
notice.
notice.
Right.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
I think you could still do it, just like you suggested, as long as you get the 48-hour notice. I mean, it's gonna, but as I said, I would hopefully those will become a minimum of, I mean,
Yeah, I'm
Rare.
just thinking, if there's something that happens.
hypothetically,
and
right.
What I've learned in 10 weeks is anything can happen.
So let's take the special meeting that I called last time. I called the 23rd, the June 23rd meeting. I called it to approve the special education test that needed to be approved prior to the submitting of the waiver. That's why I called that meeting. Yes, we added a couple more items to the agenda, but that's why I called the meeting, because I needed approval of that. And it wasn't ready for approval because it had to go to the roundtable first, and we had that meeting to get set up before we could do our meeting. So, it was a combination of how, we had more than one body to take it in front of. So that's why I called that special meeting, for that test, literally. And then we added a few more things to that agenda. But, that's an example.
But I would say in the future, I would not add any additional items except for the special one at that time.
And
then-
probably shouldn't.
And treat it as,
As that's what we're meeting
that's the
for.
purpose, and that's why it's a special meeting, and it clarifies that.
Yeah,
So is that something, that might clear up, maybe we should add that the special meeting will only deal with the topic for which the meeting was called.
I would be fine with
I think that's a good idea
Are
too.
you okay with that?
That the special meeting can only deal with the topic for which the meeting was called. Then that clears that up too. Then nobody can add other items to it. We'll just, deal with whatever the topic was that
And
needed
then
to be
it
dealt
could be a
with.
very
Quick meeting
quick
and be
meeting
done
and typical special meeting.
My only caution to that is if because people want things on the agenda, there becomes a special meeting on a regular basis, I think your time is valuable.
Nobody wants to do that.
Right.
So-
Driving time.
So, my concern, I think I agree that we shouldn't have these last minute action items for anyone. But most importantly, for the public who needs the opportunity to come and have advance notice to testify. What I would hate to have happen at the August meeting is for our task force to put something forward and for other members of the board to come forth with a second document. I would love a document for the board to vote for.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that after we kind of
Okay.
talk through all the items.
Okay,
So
all
we'll
right.
just kind of keep that
Okay.
keep that on the forefront, because I'm with you. I want to produce a document that everybody feels comfortable with, that meets the needs, solves the issues, and allows for a smooth board meeting. So the next item in both packets was the appeal process, and what does that mean? So my goal in presenting what I presented to you in the actual agenda item meeting was to eliminate even having appeals, okay? And we've kind of done that. There isn't going to be anything added, so there's no appeal that can happen regarding putting special items on the agenda or a special meeting, because we just took care of all of that prior to that. And then there was a suggestion for interpretation of board meeting procedures. I will tell you that I feel that doing this procedure here is where that should occur, that if there's a misinterpretation or we don't know how to interpret, that we form our little committee and we talk about it and we take it back forward to have one board member put out something, here's how I think it should be interpreted, and have a vote right there, just adds to the dispute and adds to the time that we're going to dispute. Maybe if there's a dispute as to it, maybe a meeting we call for an ad hoc committee meeting right away. We say, hey, then let's form an ad hoc committee meeting. There's obviously a dispute over the procedures, and this is what we'll do. And that way we don't have to further address it at the meeting or have arguments. We can just simply, we know here's what's going to happen. It's going to.
Oh, okay, I have to disagree here. I'm going to use as the example the waiver resolution
Okay.
that was properly on the agenda at the last meeting,
Oh, that followed.
and that I voted against, but,
That followed the appeal.
yes, but you
Like
ruled it out of order?
I did, and then it was appealed.
Right.
And then I was overruled.
Right, but
And that's
I
okay.
thought you were suggesting eliminating the appeal.
Not at all,
Okay,
not at
gotcha.
all, not at all. Keep the appeal information right there. I'm suggesting that the interpretation of board meeting procedures that was suggested that we look at is not appropriate.
So what about, okay, can we go back to the appealing a ruling?
We can, I'm fine with that. I'm
You're
totally fine with that.
deleting all of that
No, not at
additional
all.
language, the additional
Well, that was
language.
proposed. That was proposed. So the proposed language was, this appeals procedure applies to all action and decisions otherwise addressed in these board meeting procedures, including but not limited to calling a special meeting or the addition of agenda items. And we just kind of took care of that because it's not going to happen in our meeting. And then there was the suggestion of an addition of interpretation of board meeting procedures. And I'm saying this is the mechanism we have to interpret the procedures and clarify the language. not a board member saying, here's how I think it should be interpreted, let's vote, and this is how it's going to be interpreted. You should have a procedure like we have right now to deal with the misinterpretation. So it just shouldn't happen on the fly. Somebody saying, here's how I think it should be interpreted. Because I am totally for clarifying language. I think Troy pointed out that the more clear the language, the better the board meeting goes. So I think that part's in conjunction with the last part. So maybe we might want to look with the adjunct meeting, revisions to meeting procedures that we had in here. You'll notice I've added quite a bit of language to it. So on the last page, and then maybe we can see if we've got some thoughts to kind of work through it. So when a majority of board moves that specific matters in the board operating procedures should be reviewed for possible amendment, and I'm open to that if there is disagreement, that immediately, the chair says there will be an ad hoc committee to deal with this. So I'm even able to doing that. The ad hoc committee will be chaired by the superintendent and 2 members appointed by the superintendent. The chair will convene the ad hoc committee in a manner to resolve the matter prior to the next regularly scheduled board meeting. And in order for the board to receive the committee's recommendation, the recommendation must be provided to the board members 5 days before the board meeting. So that makes sure that we're going to meet and be able to get out our revisions to the board at the time they should get them, 5 days in advance of the meeting. So I thought, well, let's add all this in here so that we make sure that we're meeting timelines and everything, so that everybody has the revisions.
Well, I looked at quite a few board documents.
Okay.
And that's what led me to my language proposal.
All right.
Because I got the feeling most boards allow any board member to propose a variety of things, including revisions to meeting procedures. And I think that's fair. The example I gave was when I wanted to restore the general public comment section.
Sure.
That absolutely did not need an ad hoc committee. It just needed a good up and down vote by the board. And I should have been able to bring that matter immediately without it having to go to an ad hoc committee, which is why I'm suggesting a heightened majority, because we don't want to change meeting procedures every time we turn around. And just let anyone or any committee revise meeting procedures, but require a 2/3 majority for approval. So that heightened majority would make sure that we wouldn't just change the rules every time we didn't like something.
So I think the reason why we put the ad hoc committee kind of in is because of what we're doing here today. It takes specific language changing. And so just to bring it up and down for a vote, make it at the conceptual piece that you want to do, but it doesn't necessarily get at what the language changes will be.
You have to submit it 7 days in advance, so you ought to be able to put together decent language before a board meeting.
Oh, because what was proposed, okay, so
This is what I'm
well, let me
proposing.
clarify
Okay.
then. Okay, because maybe I'm not understanding. I thought that you were wanting to have the interpretation of board meeting procedures as they were. Anybody could interpret them, or anybody could change them through a board committee. And these other board committees that we set up, Andrea, they can be set up in 2 ways, okay? The first way is that the chair can just designate it, okay? The second way is that it takes a motion by the board to set one up. And we've done it both ways. I set up a committee, and then BJ just set up a committee at the last meeting, okay? And so if we just had any committee to do it, then it might not even include the chair. Okay, so BJ's committee that he set up last time doesn't have me on it at all. Okay?
Turn around.
Right. So I'm not involved in any way in that committee, all right? So the ad hoc committee was formed, so at least the chair was there, because the chair has a role in the actual running of the meeting. And then we decided on 2 other people that would be there. Now, that's just how we've been doing it to resolve the language pieces. And so I'm unclear what you're suggesting we do to resolve board meeting procedures. Are you suggesting keep the ad hoc committee and it requires 2/3?
I'm suggesting
Voting.
we eliminate the current language
Okay.
and replace it with my language.
Okay, which is
Which is
what?
revisions to meeting procedures may be proposed as an agenda item by any member or a special committee. A 2/3 majority of members voting shall be required for approval.
So you just want to add it as an action item?
It could be an
And
action
that's,
item,
and
or it
that's
could be,
it.
or it could
And
go to
so,
a committee.
so you would just bring your language forward and people would vote it up or vote it down?
That's what I'm proposing,
At the meeting, Andrea, or 7 days in advance as an
just
action
like any
item?
other agenda
So the
item.
language would be submitted 7 days in advance.
So where would,
But again, I like that idea with the 7 days in advance, because that allows the chair to be able to contact them and get clarification. And possibly, as I said, if we do the back work with the suggestion, we might be able to say, well, you know, here's some holes that I see. Do you want to push forward? And then it would be say yes or no. I mean, it would be very easily for somebody to be able to say, you know, okay. Because like your idea about the public statement, I don't think anybody was opposed to that. But they had a chance, you had a chance to review it, you have a chance to question it, and then we also have a chance to vote on it, and it has to be 2/3 instead of just majority. So that means it's gonna have to be an 8-3
Seven,
vote.
so it would be
Yeah.
seven, it'd be seven, wouldn't
It
it?
has to be 8-3.
Because it's 7, it's like 7 and a third.
It's an
or
8-3
something.
vote.
So I rounded down, but that's not how you do
can't.
it?
I would think you'd have to, I mean, that's something for the board to decide.
I think it's an
yeah,
8-3
in fact, we
vote.
probably just say you need 8 people.
Well, unless there aren't that many present.
Unless
Oh,
they're
that's
not
true, that's
having
true. It'd be
present.
2/3 of
If it
who's
was
there.
10, you
2/3.
need
Right.
7. It's 7-3 vote.
So let me rephrase what I think I heard you say. So somebody would actually do their language, submit it, and then it would take 2/3 to approve it. So let me just talk about how all of this came to fruition to begin with. Okay, so the board's never operated with any procedures at all, like ever. And so I actually went to the governor's office and I said, I want to propose some procedures and we need to work out some procedures. So this came about so that, and the purpose of it really is to have fairness. You know, that the chair still has the role of the chair and all of that still happens. And so the talking out of the language is just as important. So let's just pretend that we followed that mechanism now, okay? Then the language that we have that came forth would be presented to us in its totality. And we'd have, I guess amendments could be made. And we could take those, be up and down or whatever, I suppose. But we wouldn't necessarily, I mean, just trying to walk it through. So if this had come to us at a board meeting, what would have happened?
Just like any other action item, and if there'd been 10 people there, it would have taken 7 to approve it.
So I've worked really, 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 really hard. I really have. I've worked really, really hard to be sure that our board is going to be really following open door and not get into the business of calling up other board members to get votes. And I don't know if it goes on now or not. But all I can say is.
Nobody calls me.
Well, that's good. All I can say is, I could see that happen really easily with something like this. And I don't wanna promote that. I don't wanna
Changing
promote
board
that.
procedures?
Yeah, where you wanna change
I could
it
see that
a
too.
certain way, and people wanna call up people to vote for this, and I don't wanna get
I
into
don't
that
think it will
business
do it.
either.
I think we're professional enough, we won't do that.
Cause, that's an open door issue with me. But
Well, my issue goes back to, first off, we shouldn't be changing board procedures every time. we turn
Correct,
around. Let's just
correct.
get something
I
that
agree.
everybody supports and it's fairly implemented and we can move forward. But I thought the elimination of the general public comment section, which I accidentally voted for, was egregious and it needed to be fixed. And I, as an individual board member, should have the ability to have brought that immediately at the next meeting as an action item. And I didn't have that ability.
So you don't see the need for the ad hoc committee.
No?
And so when somebody wants language on the board, you're unique, Andrea, you write up your own. But what I think mostly happens is board members turn to their board staff and say, write up language that does this, this, and this. And that's how we've gotten this language already, okay? And then you see that I've worked with my staff and I've said, here's some alternate ways that we can work with this language to have this happen too. So I suppose if somebody gets their language to us on time, that even other people could put out their view of it, I guess. Bernice?
Just to bring to the committee's thought process, if I may, I think thinking about Ms. Neal's example of adding public comment back, that was, I thought, pretty quick and easy and simple. If theoretically this resolution had come and was handled in the manner suggested, from a staff point of view, trying to keep notes in what you all are saying when you're all talking, it's very challenging.
Because you're having to do language.
Yeah, and so the opportunity, if it's complex, for scrivener's errors and things like that, just become more prevalent from a staffing point of view if it's complicated.
You could take up quite a bit of time at the board meeting
Right.
doing the language.
Meaning that if on-the-fly amendments are being made, it just, from a staffing point of view, I think can be ripe for error. That's just thought.
Andrea, I like the 2/3 majority, so we don't do it all the time. But I also don't, I think that's gonna maybe bring with it soliciting votes, which I don't really care for. Joy, you see other thoughts, or?
I think what we put in place, I think I can live with just because of, but I don't want to come back to it and change it 2 months from now.
What, the ad hoc committee?
No, I don't want additional. I think what we have to do is stick to something long enough to make it.
To make it work, correct.
I think what we have done is done the special exceptions far too much, which has made it hard to follow regular procedures.
Correct. I would agree with that.
And I think that it was not based upon anybody's fault. I'm not blaming anyone, but timelines were tight, pressure was there, and it had to get done, and we all felt that pressure. And so we caved into, maybe even if it was a procedure or whatever, to make sure that we got the timeline followed. And I think that we just have to be more conscious of thinking farther ahead to make sure that we are making every effort to have it at a regular meeting, and the timelines are followed on our end as board members and on the department's timeline as well, so that it fits. And I think if we do that, the people will be happy, but again, I don't want to have that public display of dissatisfaction in our public meetings based upon procedures.
I don't either. It's just, there's nothing productive about it.
Okay.
So Andrea,
All right.
the revisions that I made to the ad hoc committee, that expedites it and gets it done. Gives some time to look at the language. We could put the 2/3 vote in there if you wish, for approval. But I think bringing something like, like this kind
Yeah,
of
the
language
two-thirds
change.
vote would no longer serve a purpose if we go back to
The
the
ad
other
hoc,
language,
okay.
in my opinion.
Okay.
Right.
Mike, on our next steps, I mean, I'm happy with what was presented today. I really am. I think we've made some really good conversation. Our next steps, is there a way that this could be a discussion item first and then do an action item to allow more board input before there would be a vote? And then I think that you would have maybe a better consensus. Because what we have in place right now, we can live with as long as it continues to be enforced and done. So then I think if we allow, let's look at the revisions as a discussion item, bring it, and I would tell you this, the more pages you have here, the more confused I am.
Right.
Give me
Just
one, and let's let it be talked about and let the other members have a chance to come in, and then we can see what recommendations are made, and then we have it as a discussion item, and then everybody will be able to live with it, and I think that satisfies your
Yes,
ask.
except unfortunately, the resolution says, these.
I understand what the
provisions
resolution
shall
says,
be
but I
adopted in
think
the next
that,
scheduled board meeting.
Well, we will adopt them. We will adopt something. He's saying let's have some dialogue first before we actually do action. And I'm fine with that. You can add this.
no, I'm asking that you have
You're saying
discussion.
bring them discussion, August, action,
Oh,
the
you
next
are
meeting.
suggesting that.
And I know that the
Okay,
resolution,
I got
what
you.
it says, but again, that's going back on the same premise that we're acting hastily,
Yes, I agree.
and it didn't allow for full board input, which is what I'm hearing when I'm sitting at those meetings is the complaint. I haven't had a chance to say my input. I want to make sure I say my input. And is this an emergency situation that has to be emergency taken care of? I mean, what you're looking at, we had it July 9th, we're going to act on August 6th. And I think we've had a good meeting. I think we've had good discussion, but I think that they haven't had a chance to discuss, and I think that would help with that conversation. That's just my opinion.
Don't they have discussion, don't you have discussion before action items?
I understand, but
No, I thought that's what you were saying at first, was actually put it on discussion, have discussion of it, and then at the same meeting, take action on it also.
you could do that too,
That's what I thought you were saying.
but I don't think then you have any
Right.
chance to make any modifications
Right.
that you hear.
But when you, when there's an action item, you allow the board to,
But not until we've
Make
started the
comment.
action.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
not until we've started the action.
Right.
So I call for the motion, and then a second, and then we have discussion.
Right.
That's not the same, and he's saying we need more than that we actually
Right.
need to have.
We need to have their input,
Right, regarding it, and have a frank dialogue about it.
because I don't want to speak on their behalf.
But I don't want to spend 3 hours
I don't
arguing
either.
about.
Me neither. Me neither.
Well, I mean, and then my concern, and this is probably maybe, I don't know if the ad hoc committee could come back together, but one of my concerns is I would hate for there to be 2 competing documents
Correct.
at the next meeting. Part of, I think.
Yeah, I don't want that either.
No.
I think you're gonna have to have it come back and make a suggestion.
What, sorry, did I interrupt you?
No.
Well, I was just gonna say, you're comfortable with the document that superintendent brought in. I would still like there to be an appeal section.
Oh, it's still there. We didn't do anything with it,
Uh,
at all.
An appeal of,
You can appeal for special
It's right
meeting.
here.
You can appeal or
We
put it
didn't
as an
take
action.
anything
item.
We didn't take anything out. This was saying that you could appeal the special meeting and adding an item to agenda, but we already took care of that in another section. Because we're not gonna have any emergency things come on the agenda, or at least that's our proposal.
all right, so I'm comfortable with the appeal. What about keeping some interpretation of board meeting procedure language? Why do you think that's not helpful?
Because that's happening right now in this ad hoc meeting.
Okay.
I mean, it's happening right now. It shouldn't happen with one person at the meeting saying, here's how I interpret this.
And that would eliminate the two people having different.
But I want to be clear that at the last meeting, you ruled the waiver resolution out of order.
And they appealed it.
And you're saying that could be appealed
Oh, sure it was.
still immediately?
Oh, yes, it was.
Okay.
I had
Alright.
to take it.
And it was on an action item.
And it should have
That
done.
was on an action. Okay.
I mean, if that's what they wanted to do, that's when they should have done it.
Okay, but what's to keep you from, okay, so we could appeal, we could still appeal anything. Yeah.
So,
Okay,
so
all right.
how about a quasi thing here, Troy? What if we take some language, because we have talked about some language here that we feel pretty strongly about. So we have the first two sections with language in it that we like. And then we're gonna also bring to them, and then let's talk about these issues. And talk about what we were proposing in terms of taking away, not even having an emergency piece, and why do we have emergencies, we shouldn't even deal with it, and we can talk that through, okay? And then why don't we just bring forward the language that we could do, we felt without their input, that we felt were gonna be acceptable to them, and then have full discussion on the other. And then, obviously recommend, so we'll have some recommendations for them, but we didn't want to make other recommendations because we want to hear the dialogue from you.
If I may, to address Mr. Albert's concern about discussion of what you guys have been talking about, the current operating procedures say that the proposed revision by this committee will be presented as an action item. Perhaps what you all could do is, as you present it as an action item, you're just going to be discussing it. And if the larger voice in the board doesn't seem supportive of different features, any of you could certainly make a motion to withdraw consideration and ask permission to go back and work on it, I would imagine. I'm looking to Brian.
Well, I'm suggesting something even more different. I'm suggesting putting it on both. So we'll bring to the committee the items that we have agreed to, that we think they'll be approval, and we take action on those. So section regular meetings and special meetings, I think we're fine with that. We think the board will be fine with that, and that could be what we bring to them. And then put on discussion the other items that we felt we needed their input in order to finish our work.
Like even this.
Correct.
Where we agreed that we
Correct.
felt like taking out the.
Special circumstances
Special
is what we should do,
We
but
probably need to have
we
that
want,
discussion.
yeah, we want dialogue from them. Here's what we talked about, but how do you feel about that? So I think the other items then could be handled as discussion at that meeting. So we could do both. We could approve language, but we also could say, hey, we want further dialogue and here's why.
May I ask then for clarification? So in terms of your discussions, would you say items that you all feel are ready for decision at the regular
Meetings
meeting,
and the
special
special meetings.
meeting, and then under the eliminating the emergency, you're saying that's discussion?
Uh-huh. Mhm. I mean, this is what we've kind of looked at as an ad hoc.
So just help me in terms of the resolution and the bullets that you're to look at the resolution. Which ones of those specifically have we addressed, and which ones are we saying?
Well, we've addressed them all currently in this
But
meeting.
I mean, have we?
But the first one, we actually
Proposed
have
language.
language to propose to them.
Yeah.
Okay?
Special meetings and committees.
Correct. So that one we have completed, the first one. And we feel like the appeals section is, depending upon how the agenda part gets reworked, that's not done. Okay, Bob, that's not finished.
Right.
Okay? And we've looked at the new section, and we still haven't come to agreement on that either. And removing the ad hoc, there's no agreement on that. So we've had dialogue here that we feel we need more input to go further. And I'm fine with having that conversation.
Do you feel that we have not addressed call.
No, I just wanted clarification,
Sure.
so that
Which
I knew
areas?
of those bullets,
Sure.
which ones we
Sure.
have language for and which ones we do not.
So,
Well, we certainly, I don't think there'll be any dispute with the regular meetings and the special meetings.
Me either.
I think that satisfies.
Right.
Do you agree? Do you agree?
Well, I believe I heard you all say to add to special meetings that the meeting can only address the item for which the special meeting was.
yeah, I think we did.
I don't-
Yeah.
So that might be a
That might be
little-
controversial.
You know what, I don't think we need to add that as long as we agree on the new language for special meetings.
Again, I think that only came about
When we talked about this other,
eliminated
right.
exception.
Exceptions, right.
So if we talk about the exception, we can say, that would be a good sentence to put in,
If we did this.
if we did this.
Okay. So we can leave it out
So
for
leave
now.
that out.
Leave it out, yeah.
So then now I think it would be, my opinion, Bob, is that it would be agreeable minus that
Yeah,
sentence.
it's as it's written now.
Correct.
No changes to as it's written.
Correct.
Well, we're talking about as the version that the superintendent brought in is written.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
board
There
staff will
was one
proceed.
change.
There was a change.
There was
Yeah, we
one
took
change.
out the
We
chair
got
and put board staff.
circled board staff, and we crossed out may.
Yes.
It would say
Which is
will.
already crossed out.
So it's-
Board staff will.
Yes. In the last sentence.
Yes. Following this 2-day period,
Yeah.
board staff will proceed to select the date.
Yes.
Yes.
Provided there's
Correct.
a quorum that
Correct.
includes the chair.
So I want to avoid circumstances whereby we actually don't get to discuss this at all, and somebody just amends what we presented to put all the language in that we are discussing, and then just take a vote. That would be unfortunate, but
And I think
it could
that's
happen.
fair. I agree with that, to go back to, and then you're still satisfying the resolution by you have a proposal, but you're also having some more discussion, and if you need another meeting, you have to have another meeting.
Just if I may, my thinking is that if we don't provide language for those other three, that the drama that we were attempting to avoid is going to happen there. The discussion about
Talk to them about it.
procedures.
Well, Bob, I think what.
But you hear what, we want to.
The board, I think what we can report is that the ad hoc committee addressed the first area. Okay, and we feel we have a proposal that's acceptable to the board, okay? On the other 3 areas, the ad hoc committee would like to continue its work, and we have some questions and that we want discussion from the board so that we can complete our work. And I think that's what we're hearing, that we've gotten in a situation where we really do need to hear from them, so we know how to go back and craft our language so that everybody feels comfortable with the language that comes before them. And that's how we've been working with it, so, you know, I feel comfortable with that. That the process that we have in place, you know, we can't finish our work, but we want to, and so we want to run some things by you, basically. We don't want to present something that we don't think you're going to have some buy-in to and have some discussion with. So I'm not bothered, Bob, by
Okay.
having a discussion about it.
And I think the discussion will center around this question of
Correct.
adding these last-minute agenda items.
Correct, it will.
And I think we all object to it, but we think we're unlikely, we
I
don't
don't
know
know.
if a
We may not
majority
get
will
a
agree with
consensus.
us. So
Yeah, we
need
don't
to
know
hear
the
about
feeling
it.
of everybody.
I think there's going to be some discussion about resolving disputes.
And that's okay.
Okay.
That's all right, because there's 2 ways in here to resolve disputes, okay? And so one is to have a committee, and the other is what I'm worried, is where I am, is if we don't have disputes over these, if they're dissolved in another way. So, for instance, you know, the proposal to not have the emergency pieces put on, well, then that just eliminates the dispute of that altogether. So, and the purpose of board procedures in themselves is to really, to not have those disputes, is to make sure that you're gonna run a smooth board meeting, and your only disputes, as they should be about content. They should be about the content of what it is we're discussing, the right to appeal, a ruling of the chair, you know, those kinds of things should be there for the content items that are actually on the agenda.
I agree in principle. I personally would favor having an interpretation of board meeting procedures section, but for no other reason to make sure that if a conflict occurs, as has in the past, it can be resolved immediately, and we can move on, and we won't end up having a 1 or 2 hour discussion over it.
And my way would be to say, hey, this appears to be a dispute over the board procedures, an ad hoc committee will be formed immediately.
And my problem with that is then that issue lingers instead of being resolved immediately. So that's why I personally would favor an interpretation of procedures section with a supermajority requirement.
We'll have a dialogue about that. All right, do we feel like we're where we need to be?
I feel like that would be okay with me, but it'd have to have as you said, 2/3 majority instead of just a majority. Because I want to tell you this, 8-3, that's a significant to move forward. I'm looking at mathematically, and
Well, you'd have to have a policy decision about rounding up or down.
but I'm just saying is, if you said 7/11, I hate to say it, 7/11 is 63%, and it rounds to 64. That's not 2/3. Close. It's not 2/3.
All right. Do we feel comfortable where we are?
Well, we're going to give
And
them
what
a
we're gonna
document
propose?
that looks much like what you gave us this morning.
I think we're going to give them a document that has these changes up here under regular meetings and special meetings. And then I think what we need to do is these other bullets, that's where we want to have discussion. These other bullets that were on the.
Yes, but are we saying we want to take them a
Yes.
complete document with suggestions
No.
or just these two?
I say approve what we have done. That way it's an action item, okay, as was requested. So let's approve what we have here, but we're not done with our work. And so we have things we want to talk to you about.
And so then we'll give them a second document
the next
with the
meeting.
proposed language that you have.
Well, I don't know that we
Presented.
need to give any proposed language as we want to talk about the topics, so that we know what to go back and actually write for proposed language. I don't think we want to spend our time looking at language at the meeting. You wouldn't suggest that, would you, Bob?
Not unless the
Me
language
either.
is what you all agree to.
Right. That's not.
And I really think we need more input in those other areas.
Right,
Before
I
you
do
do
too.
the right
I do
language.
too. We need to see where they all feel like they are. Okay. I feel comfortable with that. So we'll add it to the discussion agenda as well. And I'll move that, Bob, up ahead of the action, okay? So that we can talk about what the action's gonna be on the pieces that we really felt strongly that we had agreement with and we felt the board would agree. And that we're going to discuss the remaining 3 bullets that are on that were on our charge.
But you'll only move that one discussion. item.
Correct. Yes.
Not all.
Oh, correct, just that one.
So in the event another board member submits a resolution with alternative language,
Well, we still have the ad hoc
What's our
committee
response?
in place. We haven't eliminated it yet. So if that was to come before us, it would still come to this group.
so could we meet in the morning of and look at the alternative language?
If there, I mean,
If there was
yeah, if somebody.
If there is, you'll
suggests
have it.
something.
If the
We'll have it
resolution
5
will
days
be
in
in our
advance.
packet.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have it.
I
And it would
don't
come
think
through the
that they would
discussion.
have, I mean, I don't know, but I wouldn't think they'd have a resolution different than this without hearing from you first. Would they?
I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking.
Because they expect the procedure to be dealt with with this.
Yes, and we've
We've done as much as
satisfied
we feel
only
we could do
two of the sections.
without going back.
Without-
One of them, right?
Well,
without
regular
coming-
meetings and special meetings.
Right, without going back to them.
Yeah.
So Bob, why don't you and Laura kind of work together on the message that goes out, on how we send that out to the board?
Yep.
Okay? Feel good? I think that's a good suggestion, that we're gonna go back to them and get more input. And I don't like the controversy of bringing something to them that is not going to be acceptable, because that's not how we've been doing that. So, okay, I feel comfortable with that. All right, thank you very much. Way ahead.
So you- When she had to say it, done.
Oh, we're adjourned. We're adjourned. I didn't officially call us to order.
Oh, you didn't, did you?
I said, let's begin.
Yeah.
Well, it's not really,